Welcome to the Understanding Boys podcast. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to their leaders past, present and emerging. The Understanding Boys podcast is a series of conversations exploring what it is to be a good man these days. And if you had a story that you could tell a boy of, say, 14 and he'd listen, what would that story be? And that's really what I'm asking our guests today. I'm Dr. Ray Swan, and we're a community of teachers and parents concerned with the education and growth of boys and young men in the modern world. This series is brought to you by Brighton Grammar, an all-boys school in Melbourne. To learn more about the podcast, please visit understandingboys.com.au. Andrew Lauterstein is a former Olympian, winning multiple medals at the 2008 Beijing Olympics for swimming. He's an Australian record holder for the 100 metres fly, and then when he retired in 2012 from swimming after a decorated career, he busied himself in a range of areas: DJing, developing and managing his business, which you may know of, Engine Swim, competing at the highest level in Crossfit, and most recently competing in Australian Ninja. In our conversation today, we talk about his approach to goal setting, to mentoring, and what competition and professional sport has taught him. We hope you enjoy a conversation with Andrew Lauterstein. So joining us today is Andrew Lauterstein. Welcome to the Understanding Boys podcast. Andrew, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Ray. Great to be here.
Where I wanted to start it today was, taking you back to your own childhood, growing up, Bayside, Melbourne, as a teenager. How do you think you'd be coping with the current conditions that we're all in the lockdown and, around coronavirus and restrictions and those sorts of things? How do you think you'd be feeling if you were a teenager right now?
It's obviously a very challenging time, whether you're a teenager or not. And I've been doing a bit of thinking about how it would be for a teenager. Just upon reflection, I know that when I was a kid, I was just so active. I'd always, on the way to school, I'd be catching the bus, catching the train, hanging out with mates the whole time. Then after school, I'd be doing some form of school sport. To have that taken away from you, I'm sure it's pretty challenging. But I'm sure schools have found a way to keep everyone connected together within the community. I'm sure there's been some really good ways that the schools have been able to explore that. But for me, I think, again, it would come back down to being internally motivated and looking to set some goals to achieve personally throughout this period. Something that I was always really good at was getting out a piece of paper whenever I was having some challenges and writing things down and just starting small, starting with getting out of bed at 6 o'clock every day for the next week, and I'm going to make my bed. I guess once you've started to get those processes and routines in check, then you can move on to the bigger and better things. But yeah, definitely a very challenging time for a lot of teenagers, and I feel for them.
With the, with that, I absolutely agree with you, spot on. And, whether I think it's a McCraven's speech, if you want to change the world, start by making your bed. It's great advice. I mean, is that something that just came naturally to you as a kid, or did you have, was it parental guidance, or did you have mentors, or what sort of taught you some of those lessons, or did you just sort of discover it for yourself?
Yeah, for me, it did come naturally. My parents weren't pushy parents. So they kind of left it up to me as to set my alarm and get myself up for a particular activity. And for me, that was swimming. So if I was to go to swimming training in the morning, it was up to me to set my alarm for 5 o'clock, get up, wake up my mum. I would then go and put the toast in the toaster, put it down. Mum would then come and toast it for me, and then we'd go off to training. But yeah, if I wasn't setting the alarm, there would be no swimming training. So it was kind of always on me. And for me, it was always a choice. So I had the choice to go to training or not.
Yeah, and we were talking just as before we pressed record about, one of your early coaches, Glenn Baker, and you were sort of chatting around, his approach, which was probably a little bit different at the time. Which was providing more choice. Why do you think it's important particularly for young boys and young athletes, to have more choice in what they do?
I've actually just finished reading a book on it called Range. And funnily enough, this book kind of talks about not specifying on a particular task and having a range of abilities can actually make you better at a particular task if you do decide to become a bit more specific in that task down the track, which is kind of where I think Glenn may have been pioneering a little bit in his time. So actually, as a Brighton boy, I went there to play football more so than my swimming. So I was playing football at a state level in primary school. I was playing baseball for Australia also in years 6 and 7. And then even at Brighton Grammar, I was involved in athletics, doing shot put, water polo, football, and anything that I could do, I would jump at. And I think those skill sets and having that choice to improve a range of skills, in the end, when I concentrated on the swimming, allowed me to kind of go from a nice plateau to really peaking.
And so what was it when you going back from being a footballer and obviously having some success, and then sort of you've got these two careers in a way in sport, football or swimming, and, swimming probably being a bit more individual and football being a bit more sort of group based, although there's parts of both, you're a relay swimmer and so on. Why was it important to you to sort of choose one?
I always loved the team aspect of football, but I also loved putting in the work and getting a result. And in swimming, that result for me was always about the time, not necessarily the place. So seeing a chunk of work as in a 10-week training block, to then stand up on the block, execute a great race plan, and then be given a time, regardless of the position I finished in the race. Say my time was 55.5, and if that was my goal time, turning around and feeling like I'd won, that was kind of what always drove me. And then off the back of achieving that time, going, okay, cool, let's work towards a 53.5, and how do I get there? And then what does that race plan look like? So I always like to be in control of my sporting ability, and that's kind of where, for me, that's why I gravitated towards swimming, because in footy, I gave off that handball to someone else. They went for goal and missed, even though I loved winning. I'd be a little bit pissed off if that had happened.
Yeah, for sure. And but it is interesting as well with when you with your swimming, is that if you go, and I think correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think in looking at some of your times, when you were an Olympic medalist, you actually swam faster when you went into the world champs, I think the next year, is that right? But didn't place as highly. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it had a little bit to do with the super suits. Okay. So from Beijing in 2008 to 2009, there was some great advancements in the technology around the race suits, which helped people obviously swim a little bit faster. So essentially, we went from racing in a suit that water could go through. Then they added neoprene to the outside of the fabric. So you're sitting a lot more streamlined in the water. Mm-hmm. So imagine the fastest way to get from A to B is just in a flat line. And then what happens is when you get tired in swimming, your lower half sinks a little bit. So then you're therefore dragging through the water. And what the neoprene helped you do was just sit a little bit higher in the water. So you're kind of going faster for longer, and therefore not slowing down as much at the back end of the race. So, yeah, it's actually still the Commonwealth record. Oh, no, not the Commonwealth, just the Australian record for the 100 fly at 50.8.
Yeah, it's an amazing race, and certainly as a sports fan, I know like many Australians tuning in, it was pretty extraordinary to see. And just, I would be remiss of me not to take you back there. I hope you don't mind, but going back to the starting blocks. So, I think all of us in our own little ways have these moments of reckoning, where you walk out and face a new ball in cricket, or you've got to take a shot at goal, or you're playing chess and it's, the final move or whatever. But for you, walking out at the Olympic Games, terror and excitement, you're standing up on the block and you look across two lanes and there's Michael Phelps. What's running through your mind? That must have been a lot of work to just kind of get your head right around that.
Yeah, it was. It's a funny one, the Olympics, and so the Olympics in itself, as you said, you walk out and you've got a chock-a-block stadium, and then you go behind your lane, and then everything kind of feels relatively normal when you. I always used to like to sit down and just look down the pool and just look, because you can see your lane and you know that on either side of the lane, no matter what's happening with my competitors, they can't control what was in my piece of water. So that was always one of my ways to kind of stay nice and calm, was to look at what I could control and just focus on that. And then, as you said, you kind of take your clothes off, you wave to the camera, which is a little bit nerve-wracking because the camera's right up in your face. You wave to the camera, take your clothes off, and then you step up on the block. And then as you step up onto the block, the 20,000 people in the crowd is going absolutely berserk. And then they blow the whistle, and then it goes from berserk to silence, and you could hear a pin drop.
Wow.
And then what happens is that when you're on the block and you're racing Michael Phelps, he's got this trademark backslap. So he goes, boom, boom, boom. and that's when you start to really get nervous. So that's when the shakes come in. It's like, come on, man, take your marks, beep, and then you go. So that's when. And then what happened for me in that race is I had such a perfect training block in the lead up that the race itself, my race plan was to borderline take it easy, not try too hard, because if I was to try too hard, I would force it. I'd practiced it so many times in training, how to execute the perfect race. It was about relaxing, staying in control, and letting it happen. And that was kind of what ended up happening is you just see off the turn, I would come into the turn, take a breath, push off. I knew exactly how many dolphin kicks I was going to do off the wall, how it was going to feel, and then all just about rhythm and relaxation. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So it's kind of one of the races that when you swim a really good race, you can't remember too much from it because it was almost, you're just in the zone. It was just happening. You don't have to think it through or second guess anything. And then to turn around and see a 3 next to my name for the bronze medal was pretty amazing.
Because I think going into the turn, you weren't in third. Is that right? I think you were.
Yeah, I think I was in about fifth. Yeah.
So you obviously came back really strong as well, and did it for Australia, and we all went nuts, and then we started critiquing your stroke and all the other things that armchair experts like to do, which was great. So I mean that must feel pretty amazing to be able to relive that in your mind. Important question: Where's the medals now? Are they around? Are they at Mum's place or?
Yeah, Mum's still got them. So it was always the case with all of my medals. I'd almost take it off, give it to Mum, you look after, and I'd be on to the next thing. So right. That's the way that one goes. I think it's somewhere safe in Black Rock. Yeah,
very good, fantastic. And again, as someone who, in the preparation for this interview, just rewatching some of those things, it was really great.
Well, now's the time when they all pop up on my Facebook and Instagram. It's like a year later. So it happens every year. It's a little flashback and it's pretty amazing. Some of the pictures, it's going on 12 years now since the race. And it almost feels like a lifetime ago, but yeah, it was a lot of hard work into the lead up to those games.
And how did you find the transition, moving from, elite athlete where it's, you can really afford to be very single-minded about what you're wanting to do, and then you sort of, opening back out into, the world as it is, sort of this, indiscriminate sort of place in a lot of ways, and there's some opportunities and then there's not opportunities, and you can't control all the variables, and you're not always getting reward for effort in the same way. I mean, how have you managed that process over the last 10 or 12 years?
I was pretty fortunate. So a couple of things happened for my transition to be a little bit easier than others. First of all, the last 2.5 years of my swimming career, I didn't swim very well. So that was really challenging in itself. To feel like you put in a really good preparation, as good as what I was saying before about when you put in what you feel like is a perfect preparation, and then you execute a race, and then you turn around and you see the time that's a good time. For it to happen 2.5 years in a row, every time you felt like you did a good race, to turn around and to be completely disappointed in the outcome is pretty humbling as well. And so I went through that for about 2.5 years. I got sick in 2010 at the Commonwealth Games and kind of didn't swim a good race after that. So it was 2 years of banging my head against the wall and trying to figure out what the answer was, and almost putting more pressure on myself and taking it more seriously and putting more pressure on myself. And it didn't lead to the best results. So I kind of walked away in 2012 with my head held high, like I couldn't have done any more. I felt again like I'd done a perfect preparation, but just didn't put my race together, and I missed the Olympic Games team to go to London. And then off the back of that, I was lucky enough to have been working where I'm still employed now at Engine and a part owner of the swimwear company, but I've been working there for 6 months before hanging up my goggles, as kind of just slowly getting my feet wet into the working world, and kind of trying to navigate my way. And then as soon as I finished that, I kind of went traveling for a little bit and then came back home and started working full time. So I was pretty lucky as far as my transition went, is that I was able to transition to another, like a business that was involved in something that I was really passionate about, that being swimming, surf, lifesaving, and working with athletes and events. And then also the product itself is a pretty good product too that I'm passionate about, and I like that product development side of things. So for me, yeah, it was kind of, but in saying that, work is still work, and it's hard, even though it's my business and I love everything about the business. There's still a lot of, it's very similar to being an athlete, the grind of 8:30 to 5, week in, week out, working. It's takes a lot of commitment, and a lot of, I wouldn't call it motivation. I think it's all about finding routines that work. So you don't necessarily have to be motivated, but it helps you still execute as best as you can with good routines. So yeah, work is definitely still work. That's for sure.
Mm. So just taking you back to 2010 and and the Commonwealth Games campaign, maybe I'm pretty sure I've got this right, but I'm pretty sure there was some fairly significant challenges for you around your health at that time, and it taught you some pretty important life lessons. Are you able to sort of share a little bit about, the wisdom that you gained during that time?
Yeah, for sure. No, so coming off the back of the Olympics, which was in 2008, I was one of the best in the world. And then 2009, I traveled throughout Europe racing and, racing in Milan, Barcelona, Monte Carlo, and doing this kind of a world tour of swimming, winning motorbikes and racing at beach clubs and stuff like that, and racing underneath the Eiffel Tower, and life was great. And then I moved back to Sydney, and at the time, Jeff Hugel, that was when he started back swimming. So he started back swimming at 125 kilos. And here I was as a lean, mean 90 kilo swimmer, and he was at 125. And his target was the same as me, which was the Commonwealth Games in India. And he wanted to win a gold medal there. So basically what Jeff was able to do is he was able to see what the benchmark of butterfly swimming in Australia was doing, which was me. And then he would look to replicate that. So day after day, we would come into training together, and he would look at what I was doing and I would look at what he was doing, and he would copy me, but then he would get faster and faster. So he would just keep chipping away. And I kind of focused less on myself and more on what he was doing. And then I started thinking, what can I do when he's not watching? Or maybe when even my coach isn't watching, or how do I make myself better without including my team? Because my team was essentially the same as Jeff's. So what I started doing was kind of undernourishing myself, trying to do secret training sessions, bike riding sessions or yoga sessions or Pilates sessions. And then also in the sessions that my coach had designed as recovery sessions, I maybe was doing more dolphin kicks underwater or doing breath control work when it was just supposed to be normal swimming. So I just wasn't recovering. So kind of the biggest takeaway for me out of all of that is to trust your team, trust the people around you, trust your coach, trust your teachers, trust your family, that they're all of their inputs towards you is going to give you the best outcome, and you need to take it on and execute it. However, if you are having doubts with your team, it's best to knock it on the head, have that conversation, and then maybe you change the course and your training plan accordingly. Doing it by yourself without that communication, it's a path to nowhere.
Yeah, it's a really tough one.
I thought that more was always better, and I definitely learned that, having that balance is the key.
And I guess that speaks to, the healthy mind, healthy body stuff. And, for a lot of guys in particular, in the mental health space around that, I guess there's a challenge, isn't there, about being really, doing more, and, that what had made you strong to that point, you actually probably needed to find something a little bit different to go to that next level, or expand your thinking around your understanding of, rest and recovery as well. When I heard you speak earlier, you've talked a bit about, as a swimmer in a largely individual sport, but, really building up a team of people that can support you. And I just thought it was such a great metaphor for one of the things that we know to be true for, developing healthy young men, which is that they're connected. And I just was interested to hear your thoughts around, how you've been able to, in a largely, in your athletic career anyway, in a largely sort of individual sport of swimming, how you're able to kind of connect to others and sort of build a team, around a common mission. Because I think that's really important for boys and young men as well.
Yeah, I guess that team piece is definitely something that it was definitely crucial to my success as a swimmer, and trusting your team. I guess for me, like as a swimmer, when I was 13, I went on my first international trip, and I felt like now that I was almost put on a bus, and then the destination was the Olympic Games, and on that bus was everything that I needed. It was all the tools that I needed to execute once the bus stopped in Beijing. And what was going to happen along the way, there were going to be people coming on and off the bus, and it was just my job was to just stay on that bus and execute. All of these people that were on the bus had all the learnings that I needed to execute my race plan. So I guess I had to kind of almost just it's sort of similar to putting on a seatbelt, sitting back, relaxing, and just doing what I was told. I think that was the key to trusting my team, and that's what I lost in that 2010 period, was that the ability to trust the team, and to have that open communication.
And so that's a great metaphor, the metaphor of the bus and, and being on it and different people coming and going. And one of the things that I was interested in as well, Andrew, was, how do you get people involved in what you're trying to do? Like, someone who's, you've been a DJ, you've been on, I think you're on Australian Ninja Warrior. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Yep. And you've done so many different things. How do you get people involved in what in your vision and your mission, whether it's at work or, as an athlete?
I guess probably the most recent one is Ninja. So I did Australian Ninja Warrior this year in March, and I was invited to go on the show last year in December. So kind of out of a 4-month lead time in training in preparation for the event. And for me, when I commit to something, I'm going to try and do the very best I can. The last thing I wanted to do was to go out there and not put my best foot forward. So what I ended up doing, even for Ninja, I built a little team around me. So what I did is I jumped on the internet and did some research. And then I ended up getting like a movement coach to help me with more of like my grip strength, some of my mobility, and then also he would also program my strength and conditioning. I then also found a Ninja training gym, which is in Bayswater. So then I committed to going out there 3 times a week. So basically what that was to expose myself to the skills that I would face at Ninja Warrior. So, like the rings and the mega wall and the ropes and some of the balancing stuff. And then I also found a therapist that I would work with as far as some of like my soft tissue work, because all of the grip stuff that I was doing was very different to what I'd done previously. I needed someone to help loosen all of that part of me up. So even Ninja, I even built a little team around myself. And I think it wasn't, as far as building that team went, it wasn't the first people that I went to that I stayed with. For me, that's where that connection is so important. I wanted to make sure that I got along with them. They understood my goals, and then were keen to commit with me on this little journey that we went on. I probably went and saw 3 movement people before I was confident with the guy that I ended up staying with. That was really based around connections, and those connections for me are formed with just how passionate they are to help, and then also even just the follow up. So then the communication off the back of it were the two things that made me move and build my team in a certain way.
Yeah, it's great advice. And, I think, doesn't it ring true, the idea of just having someone who's really passionate and committed? People like that, they just, they attract good energy and, things start moving. And it seems to be a fundamental part of being able to work with others is bringing your passion and your joy, into what you do. I think that's a really great piece of advice for people, particularly if young boys are listening to this, whether it's at a club level or looking for a mentor or, looking for someone to kind of guide you in that next step that you're hoping to take. Finding someone who has that passion and joy and love of what they do can really just bring so many unexpected gifts along the way.
Yeah, and also what I found was it was the guy who challenged me as well, and it was honest. So when we we set the goal of the Ninja Warrior, he kind of said the first thing is you're going to need to lose some weight. It wasn't that I was overweight, but it just came back to the end goal of being able to manipulate my body and hang off your fingertips. At being 100 kilos, it's just going to be too hard. So that little bit of honesty was like, yeah, hey, you are right. Let's see what I can do to lose 6 or 8 kilos over the next couple of weeks, because it is going to make it a little bit easier. So yeah, that connection and then honesty, being transparent was really key as well.
And speaking of honesty, obviously you need, a lot of honesty in feedback and giving and receiving feedback. And that's a key part of goals and goal setting. You've sort of touched a little bit on, along with routines and good practices and daily rituals, if you like, how important that's been in your life. If you were giving advice to, either boys or parents about goal setting, what's the Andrew Lauterstein sort of model of goal setting that you think really works?
Yeah. So I'll use a really recent example of myself for goal setting. So about when it was 2 weeks ago when we were forced to go back into lockdown 2.0, and it was on a Sunday, and I was sitting on the couch and I was munging out watching Netflix all day, and I was a little bit down and, a little bit sad about, the challenges that I was going to have with work and my mates were going to have with, not being able to go to the gym and keep their routines and potentially losing their job. And I was just a little bit upset. And so I kind of wallowed in it for kind of half a day. And then I got up at 5 o'clock and I said, I've got to kick myself out of this because tomorrow's Monday. I've got to get back on the bandwagon and get moving. So what I did is I kind of separated myself from my partner and sat down in the office and got out a piece of paper. And I went back to what I knew how to do and what I'd always done, and that's goal setting. So I got out a piece of paper and I just started writing. I can't remember exactly how I started off at the top, but I almost wrote, "Dear diary, I'm feeling XYZ. I'm feeling a little bit sad. I'm worried about this," and I kind of poured my emotions out in a bit of a paragraph about how I was feeling that exact time, and then I wrote, "I know how to get out of this." And setting goals is the way that I'm going to move forward. My goals for the next 6-week block are, and then I just started listing a few different things, and not necessarily all work related or all physical activity related, but some of them are just really basic things. So for me, for this month, I've been doing Wim Hof breathing in the morning, which is just a very simple breathing routine, but it was the commitment to that and the ability to slow down. I listened to Trevor Hendy around some breathing on one of the earlier podcasts that you've done, Ray, and I thought that was, I think you did a bit of a Deepak Chopra style breathing,
yeah,
but
right.
I've used Wim Hof. So I've been doing that every morning, which I felt was really good for me. And then the other one was I was going to get up at 5:15 every morning for the next 6-week period, excluding the weekends. I was going to do at least 4 gym sessions. I was going to go for 2 hour-long walks with my partner. And then work-related, I also set a couple of goals. So that was kind of how I did it. And then after writing it down, I went and met with my partner and told her my goals as well. So what I think is really important with goal setting is that, one, you write it down for yourself, but then you speak to someone about it, someone that you trust and that you confide in, and then it makes it real. And then right. So that they can hold you accountable for those goals, but then they can also support you with those goals. So that's kind of my basic strategy around goal setting. It's writing it down and then telling someone about it.
Yeah, it's a really nice mix, isn't it? Because as you say, you've got the accountability measure, and if you say something publicly, then you're more likely to stick to that. And then also, you someone else is in, to use I guess maybe a school-based word, but they're enrolled in in your story as well, and what you're trying to do and to move towards, and in itself. We were talking earlier about connections. I mean, that's a wonderful thing to do, isn't it? To help someone, whether it's like your coach or, someone that you're talking about helping Jeff, with his training in a way by being the benchmark, helping someone achieve their goals can also be, a really powerful and wonderful thing to do, as a good person as well. I mean, I was interested, Andrew, with your thoughts around mentoring, and obviously, now in your position at work and, lots of people coming to you and asking for advice and so on. What are you sort of learning yourself about being a mentor to others?
I think being a mentor, it's a lot to do with listening. What was right for me isn't right for everyone. I think everyone's journey is a little bit different. But I think, understanding the person that I'm mentoring is probably the first thing I like to do. Find out what triggers them and motivates them. But I still do think that there are a few core underlying values that make a good mentor and motivate someone. And I think that some of the things that are the challenges for boys now is kind of that social media piece, and it feeling like it's social proof is the verification. So trying to really, my piece around mentoring is based around doing it for yourself and not worrying about what kind of other people think. That's kind of my push as a mentor is to keep goals personal, as in, like for me, if my goal was to win a gold medal at the Olympics, and I came away with a silver and 2 bronzes, if I was to walk away from the Olympics disappointed because I said I wanted to be an Olympic gold medalist, it just wouldn't be fair on myself. I went down, I raced one of the greatest Olympians of all time. So it was really important for me to always keep the goals personal and generally specific to what you can control. I think that's the main thing. It's what can you control? Let's build some goals around that.
Yeah, that's great. And not only was he a great Olympian, he had a great back slap. You were saying an intimidating back slap. I love that story. That's fantastic. Andrew, obviously looking across, lots of the people you've met, and, this is not to preclude other people, but, one of the focuses of this particular podcast is, we like to ask, I guess, what is it to be a good man these days, or what is a good man these days? And people have answered that in lots of different ways. I mean, what are your thoughts about what it is to be a good man these days?
Yeah, it was interesting, Ray. After you sent me that, I put it out I've got a couple of WhatsApp groups with a bunch of mates, one which is a group of schoolmates from Brighton. Another one's a group of mates that I've got from after I finished swimming, I started doing CrossFit. So a bunch of mates, there's about 15 of us who all train CrossFit together over a period of time. And I asked them the same question. Then I also got a WhatsApp group of 10 or so swimmers. And kind of there were a couple of themes that came through from asking, what's that, around 30, 40 blokes, the same question. It was very similar to what I was thinking. And I think the first one was that everyone wants to be trusted. And that's what it is to be a good man. It's trusted by yourself, trusted by your friends, and trusted by your family. I think there was another one before you were the deputy headmaster at Brighton. It was Mr. Peter Skelton, who was the deputy headmaster, and his school rules were, he liked to always talk about having courtesy and common sense as the kind of the underlying theme for the way that we went about being boys at school. And I think that kind of ties in quite nicely to everything all my mates said, was that if you have a good moral compass and then you execute good courtesy and common sense, you'll be a pretty good man. And then another one that I've been trying to work on myself personally is really trying to be a man of my word. So if I say I'm going to do something, do it. If I'm not going to do it, maybe just don't say it because you're only going to let someone down, or even yourself. So if you do say you're going to do something, do it. And I think that makes a good man.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I suppose that speaks to that quality of having integrity, doesn't it? And I guess in listening to you speak, I'm thinking of someone who knows knows what their true north is, knows where they're going, knows what they believe, and, and have an internal and external consistency that sort of supports that, that can create, real stability and a sense of who you are and that you're acting in accordance with your beliefs and your values. So yeah, I think that's a really great answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And the last question that we have, Andrew, is around if you had a piece of advice or a story that you could tell a 14-year-old boy and he'd listen, what would the story be?
I remember as an old boy that I went back to Brighton and attended a school assembly. It was probably in 2012, after I'd moved back to Melbourne and retired from swimming. I was invited along to an assembly, and I was to congratulate some athletes on outstanding performances over the season. And I remember jumping up on stage and shaking a number of the boys' hands, and the way that they were able to look me in the eye, give a firm handshake, and how well they were presented was something that made me really proud, and made me proud to be a Brighton Grammar boy, and made me reflect upon my time at Brighton Grammar and how proud we were to be, Brighton Grammar boys, and how well we looked after our uniforms, and, how we kept our ties up and our socks up and our hair well kept. It kind of leaves you in very good stead for becoming a good man in life after school as well. So I think those small things can sometimes be undervalued as to how far it can take you, and the respect, a good handshake, a good thank you, and good eye contact can take you in the world, because that's it's something that definitely stood out to me. And I even went home and mentioned it to mum and dad about, I feel like the school is in a really good position when they're producing boys like that on a consistent basis that can come out and shake my hand, and it'd be a school that I'd want to send my boys to. So that's hats off to you and the team at Brighton Grammar, because, it's definitely something that kind of gave me goosebumps at the time, and it's such a small thing, but it leaves you in very good stead for a good life.
It's amazing, isn't it, Andrew? Those little things, in being personable and, like you say, looking someone in the eye and being, really present to somebody in showing up and being authentic, and, like a warm handshake and a twinkle in the eye and all of those things, they really do go a long way in the, in the humanity of, in the everyday of life, particularly at the moment while we're all, in this such a strange time, we're talking to each other via Zoom and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's so true that, and especially in today's landscape, everything is mobile, and everything's quite fluid, and a lot of things you can learn on the go. And if you're willing to put yourself out there, to trust in someone else, to give them a good handshake, they're likely to trust you and really give you an opportunity. So it can really set you up, because that's something that I've learned, that is that you only get good at something by doing it, and you're probably going to have more doors open for you if you are getting a good handshake and giving that eye contact, because it can take you a long way.
Well, Andrew Lauterstein, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Understanding Boys podcast. Thank you so much for your time, and I've got a feeling that with all of the various things that you've done up until now in your life, it's really only a precursor for what is shaping up to be an extraordinary contribution to whether it's athletics or fashion or DJing or Australian Ninja and so on. I think there's a lot more in store in the Andrew Lauterstein chapter. So again, my thanks to you, and we wish you all the best from Understanding Boys.
Appreciate it, Ray. Catch up soon.
We hope you've enjoyed this Understanding Boys podcast. Make sure you subscribe on your podcast app, and please leave us a review to help grow the community. For more information about the podcast, please visit understandingboys.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.